The storm raged with a ferocity that seemed to shake the very bones of the earth. The skies were a swirling mass of dark clouds, their edges jagged and angry, as though the heavens themselves had been torn apart. Beneath this chaos, the village of Oru nestled uneasily in the valley, its homes trembling against the battering wind. It was a night when secrets could no longer remain buried, and destinies would collide in a tempest of sorrow and rage. Amara sat huddled in her corner of the dimly lit hut, her hands trembling as she clutched her shawl close. Her world had been turned upside down ever since the council summoned her to the palace 3 days prior. The Council of Elders, led by the austere Chief Odian, had accused her of bringing a curse upon the village. At 19, she had married the aging King Edissa, a union born of duty and politics rather than love. Amara had always known she was an outsider in the royal household, but this accusation had left her shaken to her core. The day the accusation was made, Chief Odian's voice had boomed across the throne room, cutting through the air like a blade. The gods have spoken, King Edissa. A darkness festers within your house. Your youngest wife carries a child not of your blood but born of betrayal. Gasps rippled through the room as all eyes turned toward Amara. She had fallen to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she tried to protest her innocence. Yet, the god's judgment, relayed through the high priestess, was absolute. The king's other wives looked on with expressions that ranged from schadenfreude to pity. Queen Aoife, the eldest and most dignified, had remained silent, her gaze inscrutable. But it was Queen Uju, sharp-tongued and cunning, who had seized the moment. The girl's beauty has always been a weapon. She has bewitched us all, she had declared, her voice dripping with venom. Now, the gods themselves demand justice. Amara's only ally was her brother, Kalechi, a fisherman who lived by the river on the outskirts of the village. When he heard of the accusations, he came to her defense, storming into the palace and pleading with the king. "My sister is innocent," he had said, his voice steady despite the quivering of his hands. "She has done no wrong." But his words fell on deaf ears. The high priestess had decreed that the child in Amara's womb was a curse, and the only way to cleanse the village was to sacrifice it upon birth. Amara had spent the last 3 nights haunted by the high priestess's declaration. Her dreams were filled with visions of fire and blood, the cries of a child she had not yet held echoing in her ears. And yet, beneath her terror, a spark of defiance burned. She would not allow her child to be taken from her, not when she had done nothing wrong. But how could she fight against the gods themselves? The storm continued to rage as dawn approached. Amara made her way to the edge of the village, her cloak wrapped tightly around her swollen belly. She met Kalechi by the river, his face pale but resolute. He had been working on a plan, one that carried immense risk but was their only hope. "We will leave tonight," he said, his voice low but firm. "The river will carry us far from this cursed place. I have a friend in the next kingdom who can help us. But we must act quickly." Amara hesitated, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a stone. "If they find us, they will kill us both," she whispered. "Then let them try," Kalechi replied, his eyes blazing with determination. "I will not let them harm you or your child." As the first rays of sunlight broke through the storm clouds, Amara and Kalechi set their plan into motion. They would use the cover of night to slip away, traveling down the river in a small boat Kalechi had hidden among the reeds. But fate had other plans. Queen Uju, ever watchful, had grown suspicious of Amara's movements. She sent a servant to follow her, And when the servant reported back, Uju wasted no time alerting the king. By nightfall, the palace guards were searching for Amara. She and Kalechi barely had time to push their boat into the water before they heard the shouts behind them. Torches flickered along the riverbank as the guards gave chase, their voices ringing out in the darkness. Stop them. They must not escape. Kalechi rowed with all his strength, the muscles in his arms straining against the current. Amara clung to the side of the boat, her heart pounding as the sound of the guards grew louder. Just when it seemed they would be caught, the river took a sudden turn, its banks narrowing and forcing the guards to abandon their pursuit. For now, they were safe. Hours passed as they floated down the river, the adrenaline slowly giving way to exhaustion. Amara closed her eyes, letting the gentle rocking of the boat lull her into a restless sleep. She dreamed of her mother, who had died when she was just a child, and of the lullabies she used to sing. When she woke, the sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the water. They reached the next kingdom by midday, docking at a small village where Kalechi's friend, a healer named Nkem, welcomed them with open arms. Nkem's home was modest but warm, filled with the scent of herbs and the sound of birdsong. She listened to their story with a grave expression, her brow furrowing as she considered their plight. "You have done well to come here," Nkem said, "but the danger is far from over. The god's wrath is not easily escaped." Amara nodded, her hands instinctively cradling her belly. "I will do whatever it takes to protect my child," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. For weeks, they stayed hidden in Nkem's home, waiting for the child's arrival. Amara's labor began on a quiet night, the stars shining brightly overhead. Kalechi paced outside the hut, his heart pounding as he listened to her cries. When the baby finally came, it was a girl, her tiny body perfect in every way. Amara held her close, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "You are my light in the darkness." But their joy was short-lived. News of their escape had reached the next kingdom, and the king's emissaries arrived at the village within days. They demanded that Amara and her child be handed over, threatening to burn the village if their orders were not obeyed. The villagers, fearful for their lives, turned against them, forcing Nkem to make a desperate decision. "You must leave now," she said, her voice trembling. "Take the child and go. I will distract them." Kalechi protested, but Nkem silenced him with a fierce glare. "There is no time to argue. Go!" With heavy hearts, they fled into the night, carrying the baby wrapped in a blanket. Nkem's sacrifice gave them a head start, but the emissaries were relentless. The chase led them deep into the forest, where the trees loomed like silent sentinels, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and moss. When they could run no further, Kalechi turned to Amara, his face etched with despair. "We cannot keep running," he said. "If they catch us, they will kill the child." Amara's heart broke as she looked down at her daughter. She knew what she had to do, even if it meant losing the one thing she loved most. With trembling hands, she kissed the baby's forehead and placed her in a hollow tree, covering her with leaves to keep her hidden. "Stay strong, my little one," she whispered. "The gods may forsake us, but I will never stop loving you." When the emissaries found them moments later, Amara and Kalechi surrendered without a fight. They were taken back to the palace, where the high priestess awaited them. The child's absence enraged the king, who ordered their execution. But as the high priestess raised her staff to deliver the god's judgment, a sudden wind swept through the throne room. extinguishing the torches and filling the air with an unearthly chill. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the darkness. The child lives, and with her, the truth. Those who seek to harm the innocent will face the wrath of the gods. The high priestess fell to her knees, trembling as the voice faded. The king, shaken to his core, ordered Amara and Kalechi to be spared. But the damage had been done. The village of Or would never recover from the shame of its actions, and the royal household was left fractured and broken. Years later, a young woman with a bold birthmark on her back arrived in the village. She carried herself with a quiet strength, her eyes shining with determination. Though she spoke little of her past, her presence brought a sense of hope to those who had long lived in fear. She was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of truth could never be extinguished.